Welcome to the True North 365 podcast, where we bring valuable information the world needs to hear to live out their true potential, realizing they have everything they need inside of them to go higher, reach their dreams every single day of the year. We bring guests on the show who are living out their dream life to showcase their work, dig into the climb they endured to get from where they were to where they are today, exposing the entrepreneurial myth that it's all easy. In addition to smaller bite-sized clips of me just sharing my everyday thoughts on business, family, spirituality, and general well-being. So sit back, turn it up, and enjoy the episode. We're so grateful you're here.
Cool. Okay, I am so grateful that we have the guest that we do today, guys. She has been a major influencer, not only in my life, but in over 500 women's lives that she's been able to impact, along with two of her partners at Level Up, and also in her financial advising business with World Financial Group Transamerica. She's built a team with her partner Cameron and has really helped women embrace money and professionalism and personal development in all the areas that Superwoman would. So we essentially have Superwoman on the show with us today. So I'm so honored and excited to introduce to you Denaye Austad. So welcome, Denaye.
Thank you. That was an amazing introduction. I was like, wow, I should just pay you to follow me around and introduce me to people, because that was great. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And Alex, I could say a lot of the same things about you, not in the context of running a financial business, although I know that you have quite a team going on yourself, and Alex is you're quickly becoming one of my my key people right away. So we haven't known each other very long, so it's funny that that's the case. But I'm excited to have you in my life as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, likewise. We are having a good time. We've been, so right now, for those that are listening to this podcast way into the future, we are currently in the midst of coronavirus, and we're on quarantine, we're on lockdown, good old isolation, and we're in the just kind of like the beginning of it. Like, it's the beginning of April 2020, and they just issued a whole nother 30 days for us to be away from each other. So it's definitely a time to rally around our friends and to lift each other up and be there for each other. So the fact that you're willing to kind of lift the curtain and show us what you've been through, you know, even from the time you were a little girl to where you are today, the challenges that you face, because when someone looks at somebody in your position, Denaye, and all the things that you're doing with Megan and Sarah, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are their names with Level Up? Is that right?
Yes, you got them.
Woo! Okay, good. So what you're doing over there, a lot of people will look at it and be like, oh, they just got lucky. Oh, they were just born that way. And I'm here to break the myth, girl, because you and I both know that's not true. And we want to inspire those people that think that it's just the easy route or the lucky ones that get to make it here, and also highlight what you do. So whichever route you want to go first is the route we will go.
Okay, sweet. So I guess I'll kind of start where you started. What a weird time we're dealing with right now. It is all over the place. So I guess I've been seeing a lot of unique opportunities and a lot of unique struggles that people are facing right now. So I'll kind of touch on that. But what an interesting time. So I guess I'll talk about what it is that I actually do first. So you're correct. Level Up is a women's organization, kind of a collaborative that I helped found with Megan Johnson and Sarah Flannery. Megan is a life coach for entrepreneurial women, and Sarah is a mortgage loan officer, and they're both incredible angels of women, and I so appreciate them. I'm very grateful for everything that they've brought to my life. But we ended up starting Level Up for a couple of reasons, and for those of you who haven't been or who don't know what I'm talking about, anybody who ends up being a business owner or an entrepreneur, whether or not you identify as that just yet, anybody who needs people in their life for any sort of reason. I know that when I got into finance in the first place, I ended up falling into the networking world. And Alex, I know that's kind of roundabout how I found you through, a couple different connections. But when I started networking, and please tell me if you've had the same experience or if this resonates with you. But when I started networking, because I didn't know any people, right? I came from the service industry, which is a fancy way of saying bartending. I was a bartender and a server. I worked in bars and nightclubs and resorts and all sorts of crazy stuff. But when I got into finance, I realized that my friends were, for the most part, young and broke. Who knew, right? All my bartender friends were happily content being bartenders. Most of them weren't really focused on their goals or their future or any sort of large vision for their lives yet. A lot of them will over time, but it's easy to be young and have fun and not really worry about tomorrow or what else is going on. So when I started my practice, I realized that I needed to meet people quickly and I didn't really know how. So I started going to networking groups. And I quickly found, because I would go to, 4 or 5 networking events a week because I didn't have very many clients. So that's all I needed to spend my time on. I'd go to all of these networking events and I tried a whole bunch of different kinds, and I would do somewhere between 15 to 20 one-on-ones a week. That was all I did. I went to networking groups and I did one-on-ones. So anybody who had a business card, I would sit down with and hear about everything that they were doing. I tell them what I was doing. I didn't really know what I was doing, so the conversation was fairly one-sided at that point. But what I found frustrating about those situations is that everything was kind of a surface level connection, because you go to networking groups and the whole conversation is business is awesome and everything is great, send me clients. And a lot of times that's not really the case. For the sake of vulnerability, I think that we can all kind of admit that running a business is really, really hard. Not all the time. There are really exciting, awesome moments as well. But especially when you're getting started, sometimes it just feels like an uphill battle and a struggle. And so connecting with somebody on the level that everything is awesome and my business is great really didn't resonate with me. I felt a lot of the times people were mostly talking about, why I should send them clients or, what they could get out of me. And it was just really frustrating and kind of emotionally draining. I definitely identify as an introvert, which definitely doesn't mean that I don't like people. I love people, but they don't usually give me energy. They tend to drain me. So I was realizing that a lot of these conversations were so soul sucking afterwards, and it was really frustrating. But when I started to hit events that were more focused on women and a little bit more intimate, I found that the conversations we were having were way less everything is awesome, send me business. And it switched a little bit more to, how can I help you? What are your goals? What can I do to move you forward? Who can I introduce you to? What are your values? What are some of the things that you're working toward? How can I add to your life? And those conversations were so different. It didn't make me feel drained. It made me feel energized, like I could do more and I could be more. And it was, I know empowering is kind of a catchphrase, right? But it was empowering in that it gave me the energy I needed to want to connect more. And that was really exciting. So we ended up founding Level Up on the premise of, everybody needs authentic connection in their life. And again, I know that's another kind of catchphrase, but when you're meeting people on a level that provides vulnerability so that you can talk about the things that you're going through, they can talk about the things they're going through. But that means when you talk about your wins and you talk about what's going well with you, people celebrate it all the more, I don't know about you, Alex, but when I got into business in the first place, I didn't necessarily have a great support group built in. I had my family, and while they're supportive, they didn't really get it. So they didn't support me in the ways that I really needed at the time, which was encouragement and resources and maybe connections and, just saying, hey, you're going to be awesome. This is going to be great. They just didn't really get it. None of them were business owners. They didn't really understand that experience. They thought I was silly for doing something, different than having a steady paycheck. Right. So, I've been so blessed to now have this group of supportive women that we've put together of people who, even if they don't do the same thing as me, for context, Level Up isn't just entrepreneurs or business owners. We have stay-at-home moms, we have doctors and lawyers and people who work corporate jobs and nurses. And, you know, we have a wide range of women. We actually have people bring their little kids as well. There's always one or two babies floating around the group, because everybody just needs more support in their life. So having a group of women who build me up and celebrate when I'm winning and help lift me up when I feel like I'm losing or struggling, that's been super important in my life. So I don't know, Alex, what was your experience when you started in business? Did you have a support circle kind of built in?
You know, that's an interesting question. I did, only because I did in the beginning, because I had my full-time job when I started my business, right? And I was a director of business development. So my job was to go out and meet other, you know, reps and owners and healthcare and blah, blah, blah. So when I left, I actually thought I would have a lot more support. And I didn't. I actually was very alone, because I went out on my own and I thought they're going to get it. They understand. They're in sales. There's a difference between being in sales and being in business. When you're still getting that biweekly paycheck, and the money isn't what it's all about, of course. Like, I'm not just saying the reason that they weren't there is because of the money, but I also kind of severed. When I left healthcare, all of this guilt and shame came over me that I had left such an amazing career to go do my dream, right, of podcasting and speaking and network marketing. Like who does that, right? None of my friends. So totally, to your point, like, I thought I did, but then when I actually did it full time, I fell flat on my face, girl. It hurt. That was a year and a half ago. That hurt, and it hurt. That my ego was hurt.
Yeah.
So, totally sucked.
Yeah. And you know what, when we talk about ego, it's so funny, because what we've been seeing is that the hardest part for most female entrepreneurs, and I guess I should clarify too. So the financial practice that I run, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but I almost exclusively work with female entrepreneurs, small business owners, independent contractors. I love working with high-powered corporate women as well, people who are advancing their careers and working hard. I love that too. It's just a slightly different conversation. But what I see is that over and over again, not just women, but people in general, the hardest part about starting a business, for the most part, is nobody wants people to see them be bad at something. That's crazy to think about, because every time you start something new, you're going to be bad at it for a little bit. But when I think back about my previous careers, excluding a couple, you know, I've done all sorts of different stuff. But like I mentioned, when I was in the service industry, everything came easy. You know, I would work a little bit harder than everybody else, and I'd give a little bit better customer service, and I'd show up early, and I'd do more than I was asked to. I'd go above and beyond. And that was never difficult for me, because there was a set standard. All I had to do was do slightly more than that. And I felt like I was good at my job. You know, I always made more money. My income increased, at least until I got to the ceiling that everybody in the service industry gets to. But, you know, I was just good at it. It didn't really take that much effort. And there's a lot of really, really competent, talented people who, especially those who, you know, I think so many of us were told growing up, oh, you have so much potential, right? And I don't know if that was helpful, if I'm being honest, because my expectations for how well I'm supposed to do in anything that I try are so high. And so the dissonance that comes from assuming that I'm going to be good at everything immediately, and then I start something new and it's really hard. And the conversations don't come easy, and not everybody says yes to me. And all of a sudden sales aren't as easy as I thought they were going to be. You know, all of this stuff that just kind of blindsided me, because I'm smart, you know, and I'm capable, and I'm a fast learner, but not everything comes easy. And that was the hardest part of it for me. And that's what I see with people all the time, is they don't want people to see them be bad at stuff, you know, or not have all of the answers, or, you know, not be making $1 million a year in their first year. I think especially kind of in the realm that you and I are in, where we're in industries where there isn't any sort of ceiling as to how much money you can make. Because I know in my company, as in yours, there are people who are making upwards of $1 million a year, $2 million, $18 million a year and upwards. There are people who we have as models who are doing that kind of stuff. And a lot of the times the expectation when you're an entrepreneur in general, but also in the positions you and I are in, is that there's this expectation that if you're going to be successful, you're going to be successful immediately and wildly, So when now I consider somebody's in their first year, I can look at their business and be encouraging. So I'm like, oh, you know what? You've got this in place. You're working hard. You're learning. You're moving forward. You're progressing, even if it's really hard. Like, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. But there's this feeling that if I'm not making 500 grand my first year, then I'm a failure. Like, I'm not going to be successful in this because I'm not immediately successful. So I don't know if that's a feeling you've ever had, but that's something that I've had definitely is, man, I've been in this for a little bit. I'm not where I think I should be, and there's a learning curve. So I don't know, Alex, if maybe you feel the same way or you felt the same way in the past, but that's always resonated with me.
Yep. Especially the potential. You got so much potential, and it's like, well, when the hell do I reach my potential? Like, what happen? Yeah. That's, I was just telling my mentor last week that it's coming up for me that they always told me I had so much potential. Mm-hmm. And when I was in first grade, an art teacher scolded me in front of the class because I was filling in the lines manually instead of doing autofill for a mug I was making for my parents for some parent day or something. And ever since then, I have told myself I'm not creative. And that's why this podcast took 1.5 years to get on to iTunes and Spotify, mm-hmm. because I made it hard in my mind. Like, I'm not good at being creative. So therefore, I took the long route, and everything's a choice. Everything's a choice. If we know we have these blocks or we think we might have a block somewhere, it's our choice to then hire someone who's like an energy healer, like I was telling you about before we started the show, or hire someone that's a coach, that's where you want to be. Like, hire people that you trust that are going to be able to get you to where you need to go. And but you can waste a lot of money doing that because there's a lot of phony fakes out there to say they're going to help get you to the, whatever spot it is. So yeah, that kind of brings me to like, kind of part of the show is going with your gut, right? Following your true north, going at 365 days a year, and doing it by being true to who you are. So when you went from the service industry to financial advising to building Level Up, but especially the financial advising piece, because Level Up's really fun, right? Everyone wants a community to be a part of. The hard part about that, I would imagine, is filtering women that are coming in and they're energy suckers, they're money suckers, like me, right? We know who those people are. We can smell them from a mile away, and it's hard because we've been those people, and sometimes it'll sneak up on us. We're like, oh my God, how did I get here again? And then we go forward, right? Because we've learned. But, and I'm just making assumptions here, so just know that I'm just making assumptions.
Go ahead. you know me, assume what you want.
So when you go into financial industry and you call your friends and you're like, hey, doing this new business, I'm going to be helping people out. I'd really love to sit down with you, just do my training session with you and go over, what I'm supposed to be doing when I meet with people. Mm-hmm. And then you get your first no. Mm-hmm. How did you handle that?
I mean, not well. Like, I guess I assumed that, okay, so when I got into finance, I had a financial degree, so I did actually have that as part of my background. However, my finance degree didn't actually teach me anything about personal finance or retirement planning. It taught me basic accounting, none of which I remember now. And it was a basic business degree with a finance emphasis. It wasn't anything fancy. They didn't teach me anything about saving for retirement or paying less in taxes or how debt and credit work or how to buy a house or how to start a business, normal adult things that people need to know about money. But when I got into finance, I think that, have you ever read The 12-Week Year? Okay. So there's this.
Let me say no. Sorry, I'm shaking my head no.
No, that's fine.
I have it on mute because I'm typing out my notes over here with stuff you're saying.
No, you're fine.
I apologize. So no, I have not. I'm not.
That's okay. So there's this idea that I first found out about in the 12-week year, which is basically that there are 5 stages of emotional change that you go through whenever you start something new. Okay. So whether that's trying a new sport or starting a new career, running a business, something like that, even starting like a new nutrition plan or a workout regime, right? There's always a learning curve for everything, but there's also an emotional state curve through that. So basically the first stage of any emotional changes is, for example, when you start a business, right? There's this first stage, which is basically unconscious incompetence. Okay. Unconscious incompetence. So basically what that means, it's kind of the idea of uninformed optimism. So when you start something new, when you start a business or a workout plan or nutrition plan, whatever it is, you're so excited because all you can see are the possibilities and how awesome it's going to be. So you come on board at a new company and you're like, this is going to be awesome. All of my dreams are going to come true. I'm going to be amazing at this. It's going to be great, right? So that's a great stage because you have all of this enthusiasm. A lot of times you can translate that into people saying yes to you just because you're excited, and people will talk to you. It's kind of contagious. And that's a good stage to be in. But the overarching theme is that you don't know what you don't know, right? So whenever you get into something new, you usually have no idea what's going on, and that's okay. It's usually to your benefit at first. However, the second stage is conscious incompetence, right? Or informed pessimism, where you start doing things and all of a sudden it's not as easy as you thought it was going to be. So for me, that stage hit pretty quickly because, I brought in a list because, when somebody comes on board with us, they put together a marketing plan, a list of all the people we're going to talk to. And I was excited because I knew a lot of people. I'd worked in all sorts of different industries. I felt like I was pretty credible, pretty respected. I didn't think anybody really had a bad opinion of me. And so I came in with a list of like 200 people. And then I was like, okay, well, what do I do with this? And if I'm being honest, if I had just been coachable and called all of them and said exactly what I was supposed to, it would have been great. But I had so much fear and anxiety about what it was that they were going to think of me, because I never call my friends. First of all, I do now all the time because I've gotten used to it, but I came out of the service industry. My friends were bartenders. We don't talk to each other on the phone. Like if I call somebody on the phone and it's one of my friends, like I better be in the hospital or something, because like I can't tell you how many times I tried calling my friends and the first thing they said was like, what's wrong? Are you okay? Like, we just never called each other. And so the idea of calling and then asking them for something too, like wildly out of my comfort zone, right? So instead of just doing what I was told, I kind of went about it in a way that wasn't coachable at all. I was like, well, I'll just reconnect with everybody and then I'll kind of like broach the subject eventually. And because I was doing that, I feel like, I moved so much slower than I could have. But the biggest no that I got right off the bat, and it wasn't even really a no, but I can tell you it felt like a no and it really hurt. I love my parents to death. I really do. I was homeschooled, so we'll chat a little bit more about that. It really shaped who I am. But my parents are, they're a little bit stoic when you meet them at first. My mom's great. She's a really dry sense of humor though, so sometimes it's hard to tell when she's joking. But my dad is like a stereotypical engineer. Okay, so he was a propulsion engineer for most of his career. And anybody who's worked with engineers as clients or is married to one or has engineer friends, they have a very specific analytical personality that isn't always on the emotionally intelligent side, right? So I was so excited when I started. I was going to introduce my parents to my senior partner. And all I wanted was their support. Like, I was like, there's nobody more impressive than Brian. He makes like $1 million a year. Like, he's really sharp. He's a CPA. Like, they're going to be really impressed that this is what I'm doing. And I'm so excited about it. So I like tour them around the office and I introduce them to people and I'm bouncing around like a puppy because I'm just excited. And I bring my parents in to sit down with him, and no small talk because they don't really small talk. They sit down and the first thing that my dad says is, okay, so why would somebody like me trust my money with somebody like Denaye? And I knew what he meant. I knew that he meant that, hey, I'm a senior engineer who's a couple years from retirement with, significantly more assets that I've worked really hard to create. And Denaye, just started in finance a few weeks ago. She probably doesn't know what she's doing. This isn't what her education was for. So why would I sit down with Denaye as a client and trust her with all I've built? I know that, and I knew it at the time, but my brain was like, oh my God, your parents don't believe in you, you know? And granted, Brian gave a really good answer about the mentorship and the leadership and how we work together on a lot of things. And it's all true. You know, my parents never, or my company here, they never would have let me fail or do a bad job for a client or something like that. Like there's no way that would have happened. But that was probably the no that hit the hardest at first, was just, wow, I feel like my parents don't believe in me. My sister went and worked with another advisor after sitting down with me. You know, I feel like I had friends who thought I was too salesy at first, and, you know, they didn't work with me. And over time, you know, that was really, really hard. Honestly, to the point where, you know, I think for some of us, it's really hard to recognize all of the good things that are happening, because all of the difficult things feel more at the forefront, right? And I can tell you that there's a couple times, so going back to those emotional states of change, the third state is basically the valley of despair. So once you get past informed pessimism, the third state is like rock bottom, right? And usually what that means for people is that you're putting in the work, you're putting in the reps, but you're not getting good results. So you're not getting yeses when you think you should. So for me, that meant that sometimes in my first couple of years, you know, I'd have pieces of business that I was totally counting on, and then they'd fall through. I'd have teammates come on board that I put all my time and energy into, and I would just, I wanted so badly for them to be successful, and then they left because it wasn't for them, and that hurt. And there were times where I just felt incapable and stupid. And, you know, we talked about how people don't want to see them be bad at things. But even more than that, I think for those of us who are fairly emotionally intelligent and intuitive, and I consider myself fairly intuitive, it's really, really hard to go through periods of stress and anxiety and pain and failure. It feels like failure anyway, and not question, hey, my gut is telling me that I feel really, really bad right now. So is the decision that I make to stay in and keep experiencing periods of pain and stress and things because I have these massive goals that I have to get to somehow? Or is it that instead of this actually being my intuition, it's that I'm stepping out of my comfort zone and doing something that's hard for me, so I'm feeling discomfort, as one does when you exit your comfort zone, right? Those are two different feelings, is an intuition gut feeling that something is wrong, and a discomfort from stepping outside of your comfort zone. But sometimes, especially for women, I've found it's really difficult to tell which is which. So after that valley of despair, trying to stay in and come out on the other side with, you know, with a little bit of failure and a little bit of rejection under your belt, that's hard. That's a turning point for a lot of people. The frustrating part is that sometimes you don't have one valley of despair. Sometimes you have 2 or 3 or 5 or 10, and sometimes it's in different parts of your business. But I can tell you now that although some of those things were out of my comfort zone in the beginning, when somebody would tell me no, or when somebody would leave, or, you know, when a piece of business would fall through, now, because that's in my comfort zone, I've done it so many times, things fall apart sometimes. It's just kind of how business works. Now it's not out of my comfort zone anymore. You know, it doesn't bother me. Things that a year or 2 years ago would have had me in the fetal position just falling apart, now I understand what's normal and what isn't, and it rolls off my back a lot more, you know? So there's some stuff to go through, but it hopefully ends up better on the other side. Because that fourth stage, just to finish up the thought, the fourth stage is basically informed optimism, or conscious competence, where after a while you start learning that certain actions get certain results, at least a certain percentage of the time. So you know that you're doing the right things, you know what you're talking about, and things start getting better, you know, but it takes some time. And the fifth stage, which we're all trying to get to, is basically unconscious competence, where, you know, you're doing all of the right things and you don't have to think about it anymore. right? There are parts of what I do now that are just on autopilot. I don't have to think about, for instance, I had a lot of social anxiety as a kid, and it took me a long time to get good at small talk, to get good at conversation, because I never felt like I was really good at it. I was always anxious in social situations. But after spending years and years in the service industry and in people facing, positions where I had to focus on having a good conversation and making people feel like I really care about them and doing things like that, I don't have to think about it anymore. It's unconscious competence because I've just done it so many times, So that'll happen at different parts of your business at different times, but that's what we're all looking for, is all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, after a long time, this is easy because you've done it so many times that you don't have to think about it anymore, So I'm going to take a breath, Alex, because I know that was a long tangent.
But a great tangent. I've heard of those stages that you go through when starting something new, right? But the way you so eloquently and beautifully described them, Denaye, it was the best I've ever heard. And you gave examples for each stage. And you're absolutely right. That conscious incompetence, dude, that is a hard stage. And that's where a lot of people that get into business or try something new, they're like, oh, this is going to be so easy. That's stage one, unconscious incompetence. You're like, I got this. I'm a good person. I have good friends. And then, you make the calls and you try something new and everyone doesn't step up to do it with you or to be there for you or to cheer you on, or, you're training to go be a pro football player, something. And then you go out there and you get hit really, really, really hard. And all of a sudden you realize, holy crap, this is going to be tough, for like high schoolers who might be listening to this, or our younger audience, like when you're going for something and then you realize, oh my God, this is going to be so much work. And that's why, well, I won't answer this. I'll ask you, how do you keep going? How do you keep going?
Well, man, there's a couple things. First of all, the part of those emotional stages that I like to recognize too is that people, when they quit, I teach this concept in real estate offices quite a bit. There's a pretty high turnover when it comes to real estate agents. And people usually quit between stages 2 and 3, right? So somewhere between conscious incompetence, I don't know what I'm talking about, and the valley of despair, that's usually when people quit. But what's funny is that people who tend to quit things when they get uncomfortable tend to restart that cycle somewhere else, right? In something else. So you'll notice you might have people in your life, for instance, who have done 5 or 6 or 10 different network marketing opportunities, right? Because you start one and it starts to get uncomfortable and you're like, well, maybe it's the system, right? Or maybe it's the product, or maybe it's my friends. Maybe I need new friends. You don't need new friends. You need to be better, right? But, they'll start that process over and then they'll quit as soon as it gets uncomfortable again, right? So that means that you're never really leaving your comfort zone. You're starting new things, but you're never really pushing past that point. So you're never really going to grow. Your comfort zone is going to stay small for the rest of your life. And so a lot of times people put themselves in positions after that where they never have to leave their comfort zone, right? Because it's scary. The real world is scary. So when you're trying to figure out how do I keep going, or why do I keep going? For me, honestly, for a long time, it's felt like this is just it. This is it. Like, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. And, what's funny is that even if I wanted to quit now, I don't think I could, because I'd have so much guilt about leaving my clients behind and my team of advisors as well. But I think the biggest part of it is that your why, your goals have to be bigger than whatever pain it is that you're feeling right now. And I know that sounds, again, kind of cliche, because people talk so much about your big why and, you got to find your reasons for doing what you're doing, but it's kind of true. And even if it's small and silly, like for me, one of my biggest goals right now, and it's so funny because I usually have a really hard time visualizing specific parts of my goals, but I want my own office and I want it perfectly decorated. So I share an office with my boyfriend and partner Cameron right now, and it's all right. Like, it's all right. It's nothing to write home about. Like, it's small. We don't have a window to the outside. Like, it's okay. We hardly work in here anyway. But one of my biggest goals is that I know exactly what I want my personal office to look like. I know the dimensions. I know the desk that I'm going to get because I already have it picked out. I know that I want one of those cool Samsung frame TVs that just like looks like art when it's not on. I know what color scheme I want. I know what furniture I want. I know that I want local art on the walls from female artists. Like, I know everything that I want. I know that I want this little mini fridge, filled with coconut waters because I love coconut water, and like I always have to go out and buy it, and I could just have a fridge of my own. And like, even just this one picture, this one very, very specific visualization and goal sometimes is enough to make me be, well, if I stop or if I just quit now, then that's not going to happen. That's it. Sometimes I have to ask myself too, will I ever be able to have everything I want? And sometimes that's feelings, not stuff, if this isn't it for me, so it's hard. Sometimes you just got to keep going. And I know personally, because I consider myself, while emotionally intelligent, I tend to also be emotionally volatile. Okay. And what that means in financial terms, basically, I think of it kind of the same way. That doesn't mean that I'm all over the place. It doesn't mean that I'm, happy one second and sad the next, but it means that when I'm happy, I'm really, really happy. And when I'm sad, I'm really, really down. And so sometimes things affect me more than they do a lot of other people. And so sometimes I get into this valley of despair, right in the pits. And I'm like, this is the end of the world. Everything is bad. I'm bad. And everything will always feel this bad. And sometimes what's been the best for me is be able to surround myself, like I mentioned, with a supportive community of people who can tell me what's real and what isn't. So sometimes that means that I'm calling you, Alex, or Megan, or Sarah, or somebody else whose opinion I trust, who, they're going to comfort me, they're going to encourage me, but they're also going to be completely honest about what's going on. So they can tell me, this is a bummer, but everything's fine. Or they could tell me, you probably need to shift this and this if you want to move on and be better from here on out. So people who I can use to kind of counteract the negative feedback loop that goes on in my head. I can get it out of my head and actually bounce it off somebody who's going to give me a real opinion, but be encouraging about it. That's probably the biggest way I counteract that. But if I'm being honest, like, there are plenty of times where I don't know how to get past that. Sometimes things are just hard, and sometimes you don't know when things are going to stop being hard. And that's, I think, the hardest part of this a lot of the times. And I've said like 8 things are the hardest part of this, because there's a lot of hard parts about this. There's a lot of good parts too. But the hardest part is sometimes you don't know when the hardest part is over. You don't know how long you're going to be at less income than you were expecting, or less income than you left, or you don't know how long you're going to be dealing with clients who give you the runaround. Sometimes you just don't know. And so even being an entrepreneur, in my opinion, it's an act of faith, knowing that things are going to turn out well eventually, but you're not always going to know when that's going to be,
Mm-hmm. Which is so hard. I get it.
Yes.
So
Everything is hard.
Everything's hard. Someone said the other day that as an entrepreneur, if you have you may have told me this, I don't know, one of my amazing friends said, if you're an entrepreneur and you have 2 good days in a row, consider yourself lucky.
That's so funny. I've never heard that before. I guess part of that is changing the classification of what you feel is a good day, and sometimes that means that you have to actually celebrate the small things along the way that go well. I know that because Cameron and I both tend to be very self-deprecating. I think that people tend to create stories in their head about things. And we talked about this on my podcast a little bit, and in one of our very first level ups, and that there are basically 3 stories that people tell about their situation at any given time. And I know that when I was in the service industry, the story that people tended to tell themselves was that everything is somebody else's fault, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody would have 3 to 5 people in their life that they blamed everything bad for. So it would be, well, my manager scheduled too many people, so we're not making any money. Or that girl took my section, so I'm not making any money. Or my boyfriend isn't supportive, and that's why I'm not successful. Or my parents just ruined my life, and that's why I'll never have what I want. There's 3 to 5 people who everything else is somebody else's fault. So when you hear people tell stories, and sometimes, we all do this too, but when you're telling a story about interaction, pay attention to how you're telling it. If it's even an interaction with somebody at the grocery store, for instance, you're like, well, this bitch, like, listen to what she did with our shopping carts, and everything was her fault, right? And it's so funny because so many people just live their lives like that, where everything is somebody else's fault, and that's the reason they're not successful. And it's okay to acknowledge what you don't have control over. But I think that entrepreneurs tend to default to the second kind of story, which is basically that everything is my fault, right? Because when you're an entrepreneur, you have to take all of a sudden extreme ownership for every single thing that you're doing, right? Because your financial situation is essentially up to you, right? Your clients are basically up to you. The amount of prospecting you do, the amount of appointments you do, the amount of phone calls you make, all of it is up to you. So all of the stories that we told ourselves before about, well, this is somebody else's fault, right? It's my boss's fault. They don't pay me enough, or they give me too much work to do, or they expect me to stay late. You don't have those stories anymore because it's just you. So while it's great to take ownership as much as you possibly can, there's a point where you have to acknowledge, okay, some of this is out of my control, but I'll control everything that I can in the situation, or take ownership of that. But the extreme other end of the spectrum, which I tend to hit every once in a while, is everything that happens that's bad is also my fault, So sometimes it's easy to feel like if something's going badly, it's all on me, So we tend to overemphasize the bad events in our life and then under acknowledge the good things that are happening that we're also taking ownership of as well. And that's the flip side, is that when something goes really well, we should be able to take ownership for that as well. But sometimes it doesn't feel like it. Sometimes like, oh, that one was lucky. All the bad things were my fault, but the good one was lucky. I had nothing to do with that. But the third story that we're all trying to get to is an accurate and fair idea in our own brain of how much of our destiny and our results are on us and how much are on others, right? Get to a situation where you can look back at a story or an interaction and say, yeah, that's about right. That's how much I had control over, and that's how much I don't. And I'm okay with that either way. So I don't know. It's kind of a hard place to be a lot of the times when you feel like everything is on you, good or bad.
Totally. Yeah. And you hit it nail on the head, is the third way of living, which is the area that I think you and I have both experienced, whether it's days in the week where we are like on point. We're like, all right, I know I can control this, and I know that's out of my control. So I'm in it's like this yin and yang. It's perfectly balanced. And then there's other days where okay, let's say you have yin and yang painted out on a perfect canvas, right? Ching chang chong, as my son says. And then and then you wake up the next day, and then you come out and you're like, okay, where's my my yin and yang thing? And you look and it's completely destroyed, and you're like, oh my God, perfect yesterday.
Exactly.
So how this is just coming to me, and this may or may not resonate with you at all, but when you have those really good days that are super balanced, and you're controlling everything you can, and everything that's out of your control you're not even thinking about, and then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to have another day like yesterday. How can I just recreate yesterday? And we all know I have not found a way to have an identical day. There's days that look alike, but for them to be to look alike, over and over and over and over and over again, it's tough. So and then you have the whole day ahead of you to, focus on what you can control. And when you're in business, you're in sales. And if you're not in sales, if you are the business owner, then you have a sales rep, and then a coordinator for customer service, or whatever the business is. Or if someone's just getting started and they're not they're how do I have that good day and get out of these bad days? How do you switch back over to the yin and yang? How do you get into that stage 3 if you've fallen out of it?
So for me, I think that so being in finance, for anybody who doesn't know anything about the financial industry, it's very not only male dominated. It's only about 17% of advisors are female. It's a pretty low percentage, but it's also very what I consider masculine energy dominated. So for those of you who don't really know what that means, somebody who's working in a masculine energy, it's a lot of pushing and driving and overachieving and, you know, get to the office at 6 and stay there until 10 and do as many appointments as you can possibly fit in during the day. And don't worry about burning out because you're achieving your goals. Like, that tends to be the overarching theme of the industry I'm in. And that tends to be true with sales, and real estate is very similar. Mortgage, I know there's a lot of industries who kind of operate along those same lines. And that's not a bad thing for people who work well in that energy. However, I do not. I'm very much, although I'm an achiever, although I work hard, although I do a lot of work, and I like to think a high quality of work, I very much work in a feminine energy. So what that means is that I'm a little bit more intuitive. I know that based on my life and the patterns that I've seen over and over and over again, if I don't prioritize self-care, then my life falls apart, because I'll get into the rhythm of, you know what, if I aim for, let's say, 4 new client appointments a week, and then I have weeks where I'm doing 12 or 13 appointments because I'm building momentum and I want to keep going and I'm excited because it's going to help me hit my goals. And there's this idea in entrepreneurship that we're putting ourselves out of balance right now. We're working extra hard so that eventually our lives can swing to the other side of the spectrum, which is that we'll be working less and spending more time on the things that we want. So the frustrating thing is, how much of yourself are you going to lose in the meantime if you're burnt out all the time, if you're not doing high quality work because you're exhausted, if you're not confident because you're depressed? You know, I run into those things a lot. So for me specifically, and for a lot of women, you almost have to flip the script and say, okay, self-care comes first. And when I say self-care, I think your audience is probably knowledgeable enough to understand that I don't mean like just bubble baths and manicures and, you know, tea with a lemon in it. Like, I mean, self-care to me is the idea, and I heard somebody describe it as tender discipline, like having enough discipline to do the things for yourself every single day that you know puts you in a better position. So for me, I know that because I've had my own struggles with mental health. I know that I have to, without negotiation, I have to drink a lot of water, right? So I've got this big old gallon water bottle next to me, and I try to get through one of those every day. I know that I have to eat fairly healthy, and I know that I have to eat often. I cannot tell you how many entrepreneurs, but especially female entrepreneurs, just don't eat. It's crazy, but that's what we do, because we're like, well, I'm getting work done. I'm in a groove. I'm not hungry right now. The reason you're not hungry right now is because your metabolism's slow, because you don't eat as often as you should. And then we have these energy crashes and we're not at our best. And that's part of why. So making sure your blood sugar isn't low, eating often, going outside. I cannot tell you how many months I've spent as an entrepreneur where the only time I went outside was walking to my car, or walking from my car to the coffee shop, or from the coffee shop to my car or back to my office. Like, that's all of the sunshine and outdoor air I got. Like, that's wildly detrimental if you don't take the time to spend outdoors. So spending time outdoors, exercising is a huge one. Not even necessarily like doing a full workout, but I know that for me, if I can spend half an hour, 45 minutes, even walking around my neighborhood, that makes such a huge difference in my life. And then the other one is sleep. If I'm not sleeping enough, or if I'm not sleeping well, which means that if I'm drinking coffee late in the day, my sleep is probably going to suffer, right? So if I have those 5 things in line, I cannot tell you how exponentially better the quality of my work is every single day, right? And by the quality of my work, I mean my mood, and I mean that my energy is good. And I'm a very energy sensitive person. Like, I want to be having positive interactions over and over and over again. But when I'm out of whack, I see things as way worse than they actually are. If we all have different perceptions of any given situation, and it's not necessarily good or bad, no situation is inherently good or bad, but it's the perception that we put on it. So if I'm in a good place, I see situations as better. right? Because I can leave an appointment where I closed business and be like, man, like, I don't know. She didn't seem super excited about it. And, you know, I don't know. I feel like it's going to take a long time for underwriting. And I don't know. She doesn't always return my phone calls. Or I could finish an appointment and be like, that was awesome. Like, I put a lot of time and energy into that. And I know it's paying off. And she's busy, but she still returns my phone calls. And, you know, it's going to go through quickly and everything's going to be awesome. So much of how my day actually goes isn't dependent on what actually happens in my day. It's dependent on me caring enough about myself to put those things in place. And do I do that all of the time? No. And there are still going to be seasons of your life where you spend less time on self-care. And I understand that. But I know for me, it has to be a priority or it's not going to happen at all. You know, I tend to see situations as way worse than they actually are when I'm not taking care of myself. And if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're a independent contractor or a solopreneur, you are your business. That's it. So every day you're not taking care of yourself, you're basically letting your business fall apart. So I know it's extreme, but I've had people tell me that in extreme ways because I've had my body tell me that in extreme ways, you know? So I don't know if you resonate with that, but that's my experience. Got to take care of yourself, man.
Mine too.
Yeah.
You mentioned a word before we'll start wrapping up this episode here shortly. And I want to share one more thought and then give the floor to you for the rest of the time on anything else that we forgot to cover. You mentioned the word perceptions. Mm-hmm. So I took I've been taking these Genius in 21 Day classes, and nice. They're very cool. And the one I took last night is how to fit like 72 hours into one day. So it's all about like time management and stuff. Mm-hmm. And one of the tips that they gave was about perceptions versus, you can't even see my hands because it's so light in my house. Like this, perceptions versus principles. So our perception of something is like an impulse, right? Because mm-hmm. we're not managing it, right? We're acting out on impulse, like you talked about, like, she wasn't really excited. I don't know what's going to come from it. And then that ruins our whole energy from the rest mm-hmm. of the day, right? It's very hard to get back instead of just staying in that energy because we're staying true to our principles, right? Which is having integrity, having boundaries. These are just some I listed, you know, some principles off this morning. And so having those principles written out in front of us, this is the takeaway that I got from it. Probably the biggest one from last night is have your principles written out in front of you, up to 10. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, have your goals written out in front of you and stick them in front of your desk, like all the time, and take them with you everywhere you go, like laminate it. And, because when we live by our principles, so he talked about like health, living, loving, and supporting, and all of those things, those are really, really
you know, we want to, is that just her being excited?
More and more people in our lives. So, and more people.
Sorry, one sec, Alex. Sorry. I just bumped.
So being able to, oh, yep. Here we go.
My laptop cord, it's dying over here, so.
It's okay, no worries. I'll wait till you plug your computer in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just letting the laptop fall apart, and the dog got excited when I got in there. So
of course she did. So yes, so having your principles in front of you can help you stay true to who you are, mm-hmm. can help you not burn out, can help you remember, oh yeah, health is a principle of mine, like taking care of my health, that's a priority. Having boundaries, so knowing how long of a day we're going to work. Like, am I working and am I being productive, or am I just working because I feel like my self-worth is low because I don't mm-hmm. feel like I did enough work today because all I did was plant seeds. I didn't actually harvest anything, mm-hmm. right? So just wanted to mention and bring up that idea on perceptions of others mm-hmm. and of ourselves. We might perceive ourselves as being a total loser and failure for the day, mm-hmm. but that's not the truth. Mm-hmm. And we might perceive others as judging us, like you talked about when your dad sat down and said, all right, Brian, tell me why Denaye should be my financial advisor. I'm a few mm-hmm. years away from retiring. Like, and then the perception you had at that moment was that my parents aren't going to support me. I'm not good enough for this. So this is going to be really hard. Your sister went to a different financial advisor. I'm not good enough for this. This is going to be really hard. But the principle there was that you were in learning mode, right? And you are still in learning mode. I am too. I think if we stay, anybody who's listening to this podcast is in learning mode, right? And then there's action mode. Like we want to stay in learning mode all day, but there's times where we need to learn. But the principles and like, you know what, I'm going to keep going anyways, because that's the principle, because I'm a go-getter, because I have courage, because I have faith that this is going to work out, because this is the way I see my life being able to unfold the way I want it to through this vehicle of being a financial advisor. And that's what you're doing. And that's why you're seeing success, even when it doesn't feel like it. You're really amazing, Denaye.
Oh, thanks. That makes me very happy. Yeah. I think, I don't know, it's hard to see ourselves as we actually are. So many of us have this distorted idea of what's real and what isn't. And I think that's honestly one of the things that I've seen the most in my practice. And, you know, I'm doing a lot of retirement planning, you know, for women mostly. And I will say that a lot of my clients are what I would consider pre-wealthy. So what I mean by that is that they're entrepreneurs, are doing things that will get them to a really good place eventually. But because they're at the beginning stages of that and their efforts compound over time, it doesn't feel like they're doing very well at all, to them anyway, right? So a lot of times when I'm sitting down with people, a lot of what I'm doing is just providing context, because I cannot tell you how many people in their daily lives, just in general, don't receive any sort of encouragement or praise or recognition for anything that they're doing. And there's this illusion, especially when it comes to your money, that everybody else has it better off. Everybody else is doing better. Everybody else is putting away more money. Everybody else is more stable. Everybody else is making more. Like, there's these ideas that somehow everybody else is on a pedestal and I'm way down here in peasant land, and you know, I'm never going to get to that level. And it's so funny because the people who come in and talk to me who are so self-deprecating, usually they're the ones that are doing the best. It's so funny how that works, because there's no relativity when it comes to that. And it's funny because the high achievers, for the most part, they're comparing themselves to people who are higher achievers. So, you know, the people who come in making $100,000 a year think, well, I'm not doing that well because I'm not making $1 million a year, you know, or, you know, I can't tell you how often I'm just telling people, hey, like, I know you feel bad. You're doing really well. Everything is good. Like, you're doing everything that you're supposed to. You're going to retire when you want to. Everything is good, just over and over and over again. And I can't tell you how many people are just so relieved that somebody's willing to say, you're doing all right, everything is good, just giving them the context of everything is fine. You know, we're changing their perceptions over time, because so many people come in too with these ideas about money or about themselves in relation to money. And for the most part, I can tell you, if I ask anybody where they learned about money in the first place, most people will either say something like my parents, or some iteration of the hard way, right? I either had to figure it out on myself, or I got into $100,000 of credit card debt and had to get myself out, or I started investing, but I had to figure it out online and I still don't really understand it. Or, you know, I got myself into trouble and I'm trying to figure it out. Most people never learned about money in an effective way. And even if people did learn from their parents, a lot of times it's bad ideas about money. Because how many times I teach this in workshops all the time, how many people's parents said things like money doesn't grow on trees, or rich people are inherently bad, or, you know, or greedy, or, you know, money is the root of all evil. You know, there's all of these ideas floating around about money that some people get passed on. And then people come in saying things like, oh, I'm so bad with money. I'm so bad with money. I've always been bad with money. I'm so bad with money. And just by saying over and over again, I'm bad with money, totally changes your perception about your finances, right? Because if you tell yourself like your, you know, your first grade teacher did, you know, I'm not creative, or I'm bad at art, that sticks with you all the time. So, when people talk about their money, that's one of the things we have to undo, is change that from I'm getting better with money every single day. I'm getting out of debt. I'm putting my family in a better place. I'm learning more about my finances. I'm heading towards retirement. Like whatever it is, like even just reframing that thought so you change your perception about money and what it means to you in your life makes such a big difference for people. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that note, girl, people need to call you. How can people call you? How can people get a hold of you that are feeling that way, that they've always been bad with money, or that, I'm starting off in business and I don't really know how to manage my money, or I want to be doing better. How do they work with you? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, that's a solid question. So there's a couple of ways. The first off, what everybody needs to know is that it doesn't cost anything to sit down with me. And I don't have any minimum. So anybody has access to working with me at any given time. There's not really a financial commitment. You're never going to be invoiced or anything. The plan I put together is totally complimentary. So the first place people can find me the easiest is probably just shoot me an email. Alex, I'll give you my information, but my email is just Denaye, DENAYE.AUSTAD. It's my last name at tfaconnect.com. That's my secure email. I also have a website you can visit, which is TFA Connects, CONNECTS, .com/Denaye Austad. Easy to find me, and I'm sure we can put these in the show notes as well. But you can also just add me on my personal Facebook, just Denaye Austad. There aren't very many Denays. I'm easy to find. But I always share articles about finance, things that are relevant, plenty of information about Level Up as well. You can also find my podcast, the Leveled Up podcast, pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. So that's most of it.
Sweet. Level Up podcast. I'll put all those links in our discussion, like you said, and I'm so grateful. I'm so excited, and I can't wait to see what 2020 brings us, because although we're going through, 2020, it's interesting. 2020 was really set up before all this happened to be the greatest year ever for so many people. So many people were doing so well. Mm-hmm. And then this has hit. Mm-hmm. And yesterday, I think the numbers were 6.8 million people have filed for unemployment. So people need your services, and they need home-based business opportunities. So for those of you that are listening and you're like, I actually want to know more about money and I would like to help people learn about money, Denaye's your girl. She's got openings on her team. She'll invest her time and resources into helping you become the best financial advisor. And you heard her. There's people making $18 million a year doing this. And I know one of them. Her and I both are the same guy. He's like baller. Like he's
but the biggest nerd in the world. Like
he's so relatable. And you guys have a book out now, right?
We do. Yeah, so the book is just called How Money Works. It's super easy. You can find it on Amazon. However, if you heard about that through this podcast or through Alex, you can go ahead and get in contact me and I'll get you a copy for free. It's pretty cool. It's all about just financial literacy, because I can tell you there are so many people who just have no idea how their money works. They're scared because of what the market's doing. They're scared because they don't know what their job's doing, or in a more positive sense, they just want to do better. Right? People want to retire early. They want to create passive streams of income. They want to live better lives. Like I can tell you that if there's anything that's the American dream, coming from the millennial perspective here, it's that most of us don't want to be working in a job that we hate. That's it. Yeah. Most of us want to do something where we have time freedom and we can help other people and we can build a better life for ourselves and others. Like that's it. So if you want to learn more about your money and how to do those things for yourself, in and out of the context of running a business, like let me know, because that's all I want to do too, is just help people do the same thing.
Yep. Awesome. All right, girly. Thanks a lot for being here, and I'm sure we'll have you back on soon.
Yay. Thank you, Alex. It's been great. Bye.
All right, guys, that is a wrap. I'm so grateful that you took the time out of your day to sit back, relax, and listen to the show. If you enjoyed what you had to hear, go ahead and drop us a comment. We're always looking for other people to join us on the show, to give us their feedback so we can keep delivering high-quality content over and over again throughout the year. Hope you're having a great day or night, wherever you're at, and we will talk to you next time.